Good morning. Hello. The one amazing ability we have as human beings, the ability to pull out and to think about our thinking, to be spectator to the thoughts and the emotions that our brains generate. Now, this ability comes natural to us, especially when we find ourselves in a setting where we feel safe, where we feel secure, with a certain degree of certainty and confidence. Now, this is what we call the thinking mindset. Now, other cognitive or higher thinking skills that characterize this mindset is cognitive flexibility, critical thinking, judgment, decision making, the ability to have emotional or impulse control, and especially the ability to see possibilities, to have solution-oriented and to be future-focused in our thinking. Now, when we combine these cognitive techniques together, that allows us to lead us to creativity, allows us to have insight, but especially and occasionally, if we're lucky, to be in a state of what's called mind flow, where time seems to fade away. And what we do is we become immersed in the thinking and doing. But the settings we find ourselves in can quickly change. Like the weather here from Norway, from sunny to cloudy in a blink of an eye. We can move from having confidence to complete not feeling confident, to having certainty to complete uncertainty, to having a sense of oversight, but in a blink of an eye, again, being overwhelmed. Now, this is a shift from what's called the thinking to a reactive mindset. And all those cognitive skills that I just talked about that characterize the higher mindset, that pretty much goes offline. What we're left with is basic survival instinctual behaviors of fight, flight, and freeze. Which means, instead of being solution-oriented and forward-focused in our thinking becomes clouded in this reactive mindset. It becomes a turmoil. When we only focus on the problems, we get stuck in the quagmire of the details. We tend to only see the negatives and downside of things. Emotionally, instead of addressing and understanding what our emotions are telling us, we become hijacked by those same emotions. We become hostage to the anger, the frustration, the boredom, the fear, the concerns, and the worries. And instead of making rational and considered choices, that pretty much goes out the window. What we're left with are choices that tend to be irrational and reactive in nature. And that's even if we can make choices, because a lot of the times, the choices, we become indecisive. We just can't seem to find our way forward. Now, regardless if you find yourself in the thinking mindset or the reactive mindset, it has a direct and significant effect on how we conduct ourselves. It influences our behaviors and our attitudes. It influences how we approach challenging or problematic situations, also how we communicate to others, but specifically how we manage ourselves in these situations, how we help to manage others, and how we help to manage the business. And the question still remains, what determines whether the thinking mindset or the reactive mindset gets lit up? Well, that comes down to how each of us individually interprets information. Now, information comes via the brain through two gatekeepers. We'll just keep it simple. Gatekeepers in the brain. Now, the first gatekeeper sits on top of the brainstem. It gets bombarded by about 1 billion bytes of information that are constantly flowing in from the senses. Its job is to be able to filter about 2,000 bytes of that 1 billion bytes of information. Now, if it didn't do this job, we'd soon be overloaded and swamped, and our brains would shut down. Now, it uses a number of filters, this thing. Any significant changes in your environment, flashing green light, all of a sudden it turns red, it draws your attention. And something else is called selective attention. Now, selective attention has to do on anything that's important to you, anything that you truly value. That will draw your attention. You might have bought yourself a brand new blue car. You pass thousands of cars to and from wherever you're going every day. But one day, out of your periphery, unconsciously, your attention's drawn there in the distance. Amongst those thousands of cars, you see that same car, same model, same year, same color. Now, the third filter, it's very important, something called cognitive bias. And simply what that means is that the cognitive bias is basically saying, my brain is searching information out there, looking for information that will support my belief system or a particular belief. Now, you may have a belief that Jason, myself, is a complete bonehead when he drives. I mean, that's your belief. So you jump in the car with me, I park, or I drive, or whatever I'm doing, you tend to see the kind of boneheaded things that I do. Or that's all you notice. You see me drive by or park my car. Again, your brain's kind of cherry-picking information that supports your belief that I am a bonehead when I drive, or Jason is a bonehead when he drives. Now, once the gatekeeper one has captured all this information, it gets shuttled off deeper into the brain. And then deeper in the brain is a second gatekeeper. It lies deeply embedded in the emotional center of the brain. Its job is key, because its job is to tag meaning to the raw feeling, the raw information coming in from the first gatekeeper. For example, it'll say, this is good or this is bad. This is dangerous, this is safety. Jason, this means pleasure, this means pain. If the second gatekeeper tends to tag positive or constructive meaning to that raw feeling, it becomes a positive emotion. Contribution, curiosity, sense of adventure. Lights up the thinking mindset. It means I can take a complex idea, break it down into its various elements, understand how those elements relate and interrelate, reconstitute that idea, and integrate that into my learning and move on. I've learned something. But if the second gatekeeper goes, Jay, this is not good, this is not really good, and it tags negative meaning to that raw feeling, it becomes a negative emotion. And that negative emotion becomes incompetence, a feeling of incompetence, embarrassment, fear, anxiety, as simple as boredom also. And what happens then? All we are left with is fight, flight, or freeze. Those are the only choices we have. Meaning that any information that does not relate or pertain to one of those instinctual behaviors gets tossed. The information gets lost. But it is here, at this crossroads, is where the corporate rebel stands, between the low road towards the reactive mindset and the high road towards the thinking mindset. Now, the corporate rebel understands that the natural default setting of the human brain is to be on constant reactive mode, to constantly survive, on survival mode, looking for dangers, looking for problems. But the thing is, because of that, the corporate rebel also understands that it takes no energy, it takes no effort to just slide down that reactive road. Let biology and gravity take hold. I don't have to invest anything. But the problem is, the rebel understands the further he or she slides down that road, the worse their situation, the more dire their predicament. The only choice they have when they're dealing with that situation here and now, the only choice they have is to stop, put the brakes on that reactive slide, turn around and start that arduous, hard climb up to the thinking mindset. And that is a very important thing, because it takes discipline. It takes a huge investment in effort and energy, but the payoff, the return on investment, is having the full array of cognitive, higher thinking skills available to him or her. And the mixture of those combinations to deal with the challenge or the problem of that situation. Now, how does the corporate rebel do this? And what he or she particularly does is employs a number of cognitive strategies and skills to be able to stop this. Now, for the length of this talk, I can only distill it down to 3 A's, to keep it simple. The first A is to articulate, to take the natural, when we have these abstract thoughts that are constantly evolving, morphing in our heads, and it's to translate them into concrete words, whether it's to write it down or to talk to someone. Because somewhere in that translation or that articulation between abstract thought to concrete words, this allows us to trigger the thinking mindset. Because a lot of times when we've talked to someone, we feel a lot better about what we've talked about. We understand that dialogue hasn't changed the game, but what it's changed is our perception of the game. The second A to trigger the thinking mindset is asking questions, to use a natural mechanism of the human brain, because the brain is constantly evaluating the world around us anyways. But to use that, to engineer those questions, to trigger this thinking mindset. And how do we engineer it? It leads me to my third A, aim. When we engineer the questions should be engineered in the sense that they are forward-focused and solution-oriented. This is also 2 more aspects of the thinking mindset. So the corporate rebel understands having the knowledge about the structure and function of the brain is key. It's very important. But that knowledge in itself is not that useful unless he or she can translate that into concrete skills that they can employ day to day and have the discipline to do that. So they're better able to manage themselves, manage others, and manage the business. And this is where my passion is as a professional, is to help these individuals become the rebels by bridging the disconnect between what brain science knows and what people do and what businesses do. So at the end of the day, regardless of circumstances, they can fire up the thinking mindset, they can trigger it, and they can pull out and think about the thinking. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.